In this lesson, we're going to take a look at some of the advanced options for our lights. Alright, so the first thing that I want to talk about is creating light shafts. Light shafts can be created from directional lights. So let's go ahead and go outside of our cave and let's select that direct light shaft. If you don't see it, hit G on the keyboard and that will show you your icons. That will take you out of the game view. So select your directional light. And inside of your properties for your directional light, if you scroll down, you'll have a light shaft section. You could go ahead and enable the light shaft occlusion, and you could turn that on. You could also turn on the light shaft bloom, and you'll notice that whenever you go inside and that light is being blocked by another object in the scene, it will create this light shaft, and you can see that starting to come through. And that will give you kind of a neat effect. And so if you're somewhere in the level like this, you can see those coming through. You could even come back out here. You might even get an angle to where you can kind of see that coming through and pouring through the level there. But you can definitely see it there. That's one easy way to create light shafts. You could definitely see it if we come outside here. And you'll notice some of those shafts starting to come up over that object. So a really neat kind of effect there. Now you want to be careful about using that because turning that on obviously is going to take some memory to do that. So you can go ahead and you can start to play around with some of those options there to get a different effect on your light shafts, but it's pretty straightforward. You might just make a few tweaks here and there, and it's pretty self-explanatory on that. Alright, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to talk about the advanced properties that you'll see in most of the lights themselves. So like if we go up to the light properties, you'll expand that out using this little white arrow, and that will show you all of these options. So the first thing that we see here is use inverse squared fall off. And with all of our lights, by default, that is turned on. And what that affects is the decay on the light. So it's going to be at its brightest point at the light source, and then it's going to quickly decay in a physical way out to the attenuation radius. Now, if you don't want that decay, you can simply turn this off, and you'll have more control over your light through the intensity and the attenuation. So if I take my intensity down, and we will have to take it down pretty low to get something close. Notice how it's very, very bright, and it stays pretty bright all the way out to the edge, okay, in most cases. Now, you'll also have to adjust your attenuation radius to control that light source as well. Okay, now you might be asking, well, where is this helpful? It doesn't really give us a better type of result out of that. When would this be a good time to use it? Well, you could use this for something like a fill light. If you needed a specific color in a certain area and you just wanted to fill that, you don't want a bright spot from the light source itself, you could definitely use this. And then you can come in and you can also adjust that light fall off exponent and really start to tone that down. Now you'll notice here that if we take our light fall off exponent down to 2, which is its lowest value that it can go to, it stays a consistent brightness or intensity all the way out to the edge of the attenuation. Okay, right out toward the very edge it'll start to fall off. So the higher the value, the more fall off you're going to get out of that. So you can see exactly how this is controlled with that turned off. Now if you turn that back on, you'll notice that that turns off, and then we get the result that we had before. Now obviously you're going to have to come in and adjust your intensity back if you want to use that again, and then also adjust your radius, your fall off on there. Okay, so something like that. All right, great. Now beyond the use inverse, we've taken a look at the fall off exponent. We see what that is used for. We also have this minimum roughness, and this has to deal with your lights that have specular highlights, okay, or specular capabilities. So with this light, you can see it right in front of our object here. Let's make sure that we take that light. Let's bring it down a little bit closer to that ice surface so we can see which highlight we're working with. So this one right here is the light that we have selected. If I take this roughness up, you'll notice that that highlight begins to spread out. And if we go really high, it'll begin to disappear because it's becoming so large. And the intensity of the light is not supporting the roughness that we have here. So if you increase your intensity, you'll see that that specular highlight begins to come back. Now usually we'll want to stick around to a default value unless absolutely necessary. So let's go ahead and click on this Reset to Default. All right, there's that. Now we also have this self-shadowing accuracy. These options here, the next few options, are really about fine-tuning the look. So you may be getting things like artifacting, or your shadows may not show up quite as realistic as you would like, beyond the light map itself. So with the self-shadowing accuracy, what this controls is how accurate the self-shadowing is on your whole scene for the shadows of your light. Okay. We also have the shadow bias. The shadow bias controls how accurate the shadows are from this light. Okay. So you can begin and come in and tweak those and really starting to dial in what those shadows should look like exactly. And then we also have the shadow filter sharpen. This is going to determine how much the shadowing filter is going to sharpen for this light. So you can get some shadows that can look artifacted, and meaning they have really jagged edges. You could go ahead and you could tweak this value to kind of help that out. This is really helpful on objects that have straight edges. So things like boxes with 90-degree corners, and there's a light just hitting it at a certain angle. You can use that to kind of tone that down, okay, that sharpening on that. Now we also have these check boxes as we go on down. There's things like the cast translucent shadows. This is determining whether the light casts static shadows, okay? Or excuse me, not static shadows. Whether the light is allowed to cast dynamic shadows through translucent objects. Okay, so this is like if you have a glass vase or a piece of ice that the light can get through, do you want it to cast a translucent shadow? Meaning that there's a shadow there, but it's not quite there. Okay, so some light information is getting through. Affect dynamic indirect light. This option is here for light propagation, or for the light propagation volume. That's not available in Unreal Engine 4 just yet. Okay, so that's not really anything necessary. What it has to deal with is putting your lights into specific volumes, and that will make things run a little bit faster. If it was a dynamic light, we might want to use that, but in this case we don't. Cast static shadows. Obviously this is going to tell us if we want to use shadows or not. There may be some cases where you want a light you want it to not cast shadows. Same thing with also dynamic shadows. Okay, if it's a dynamic object, you may not want it to cast those as well. Okay, and then we also have affect translucent lighting. And what this is going to do is it determines whether the light affects translucent objects. Okay, so pretty straightforward on those last ones there. They're just basically whether it does this or it doesn't. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at those, we got an idea of how they work and what they're used for. The main ones that you really want to be aware of are the use inverse squared fall off as well as its fall off exponent. The minimum roughness is, and these other values for the shadowing. These are really for tweaking. Okay, once you're down to the end and you're just trying to get a very specific look. If something just doesn't quite look right on your material for the lighting itself, you can come in and tweak these a little bit and maybe get that exact look that you're going for. Okay, so now that we've talked about those advanced options, what I want to do now is I want to take one final lesson and I want to talk about light functions, because there may be a situation, let's say something like a torch or a fire, where we want to create a flickering light. And I'm going to show you how to do that next.